Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome here in the Blauwe Zaal, and also, of course, welcome online to this lecture, More Than Human, organized by Studium Generale, and today together with TUE's student team, HEART. They're a student team working on human augmentation, which is, of course, also the topic of today. So first, to tell you a little bit more about this topic and about our speaker of today, I'd first like to give the floor to Ben Eslik from student team HEART.
Thank you for that nice introduction, Marle. First of all, Team HEART. We're a student team here at the TUE. We've got a lot of members here, so if you have any questions, you can come up to us afterwards. It stands for Human Augmentation Research and Technology. I've been a member of this team for 1.5 years now, and we're actually working on the frontier of human augmentation. And what human augmentation means, we'll get to later. But first, I would like to focus on what Team HEART does. Do you have a clicker, by the way? There you go. Humans have 5 senses, generally speaking. And what these senses do is they transmit electrical signals to the brain, and your brain deciphers these electrical signals. And the way this works, you only have 5 senses because of evolution. Evolution decided that this is the best course for humans. But this lets us not interpret the world in the way we want this to. So, for example, if I want to see UV light, I cannot do that through my own eyes. This is something we at Team HEART want to change, and we do this by taking little steps. Nice. We start off with a proof of concept where we want to transform language, which is basically, in the abstract sense, a form of data, and we want to transmit it through the human brain, not through sight or through hearing it, but through haptic feedback, showing that it is possible to transmit data through to your brain through a different sense. Human augmentation is a very broad and incomprehensible field for anybody that doesn't know of it. And that's what we at Team HEART try to fix. So through projects like these, we want to make the people more aware of that this exists. And we also want to learn more about the human fundamentals and the brain. When I started in this team, the first question that came up to me is, this is very weird. How do I apply this? How do I get results from this? How do I make something concrete out of this and show results? These are two fully functioning prototypes we made over the course of 1.5 years. They use exciters, which are basically speakers without a cone, to transmit haptic feedback, so vibrational patterns through your skin. On the left, this is about a year old. It's quite rudimentary. On the right, we made a lot of progression. It's a custom-built PCB. We made our own stuff, and it's actually right there at the top of what researchers are doing currently in the world. Oh, wait. On the long-term plan, we would like to basically enhance senses. So, for example, you can't see the entire visible light. You can see the entire light spectrum, only the visible part. We want to enhance this. We want to give the freedom of experience to people so that they can see different things. And on the second hand, we also want to open up the door for new senses. So, for example, if you want to feel electric fields, there are some animals that can do that. We cannot. That's an entirely new sense for us humans. That's what we want to do. We have proven also to ourselves with our proof of concept that this is possible and that this can actually become reality. The question arises, obviously, what is next? Well, where does evolution take us and what role do we play in it? These questions are the questions that keep us driving and pursuing that the new breakthrough in human augmentation. Well, I hope this really brief introduction of Team HEART made it a little bit clear for any one of you. If you want to come up to us after or ask questions to the Q&A, I think we will have some really great answers. The next presenter, from whom I think we can still learn a lot, we invited him here to TUE to spread more awareness and knowledge about human augmentation. He's a biohacker, he's a futurist, he studied at the University of Groningen, business administration and journalism. So I think he's a perfect candidate to make this speech here. He's a host of the podcast Supermens, the author of 2 books, one of which is here, also Supermens, and the second one of Biohacking. And he's a guest lecturer at TUE. So give it up to Peter Joosten. Success.
All right. Let me start with a story. I could smell the mud and the dirt. And in the distance, I could hear ricochets of gunfire. And I could also see the enemy through the bushes and the trees. And there is Richard. He's tall, red hair. He's our commander. Peter, you're fat, you're slow, you're useless. You're fired from my army. Oh, I was so devastated. It's March 1992. I'm 8 years old, and I just got fired from my army while playing soldier in the woods. So I went back home, crying in my bed, and while I was dozing off for a good night of sleep, I had a fantasy. My fantasy was that I was a sort of super soldier with prosthetic legs, with bionic eyes, and also that I could heal very quickly from my wounds. And now, about 30 years later, I'm actually not a superhuman or super soldier, but it is my full-time profession to give keynote presentations, to give webinars about this topic of human enhancement, human augmentation. And I write articles about it. I wrote a couple of books about this topic. I also make a podcast. And I'm also having a YouTube channel. So if you're interested in this, at the end of my presentation, I will share a link where you can download the presentation, and there are also links to my books, to my YouTube channel, etc. And all this revolves about the idea, how can we update and augment and upgrade ourselves as human beings? So before I get into the technology and the ethics and the impact, let's start with a definition. Well, this is a definition from a paper from 2019, if I remember correctly, from a couple of Finnish authors, Rakolinen, Jari Littmanen, Kimi Rakonen. Sorry if there are Finnish people in the room. And I put the emphasis on the most important elements in this definition. It's like Ben also told, it's about senses you can augment, but it's also about, I'm not really bold in this one, but it's about sensing, action, and cognitive abilities. So what are some examples? Because I write about this topic, I investigate this topic, I'm really fascinated by this topic, but it did not stop there for me. I also tried to augment myself. So I have a capability which I think that none of you here or maybe people watching have. So I'm a sort of a human guinea pig, and we're going to see what that is. I'm here at the coffee shop, and I'm going to pay with my hands, so not with cash or with cards, but just with my hand. So now we're going to see a little demonstration. Thank God.
Ja, super, dankjewel.
So I have two implants. In my left hand, I have an implant with my contact information. So you can scan me afterwards if you want to have my contact information. And in my right hand, as you could see in the video, I have an implant which allows me to pay for my coffee and my groceries. So I'm curious, what do you think of this type of augmentation? So we do a small exercise, also for the people that are watching this on the live stream. I want to ask you to all stand up, please. And also, if you're behind your laptop or your smartphone, so in the Blauwe Zaal, everybody's standing up. And my question to you is, would you like to have such an implant? If not, you can sit down, and if so, you can keep standing up. So make your decision. And in the chat, you can choose 0 or 1. And I think about 30 or 40% in the room is still standing. So thank you very much. You can all sit down. I'm curious, Gijs, do you got some 0s and 1s on the chat, or?
Mostly 0s and just one.
Mostly 0s and just 1. So there's a difference between the people who are here and in the room. So I'm just curious to pick one. I'm curious about why did you choose to have such an implant or not. So I'm just to throw this random one in the audience. So did you want to have an implant or not?
I was going for an implant.
Yeah.
I think it would be an amazing way to just pay with your hands, and if you can like share your contact info by shaking someone's hand or something like that.
Yeah, okay, thank you for your answer. You can throw it back. And what's your name, by the way? Sam. Sam, if you go and visit me after the presentation, you get a copy of my book. So a round of applause for Sam. So I just asked you a question if you want to have a certain implant yourself or a certain augmentation yourself, but now I want to do a small thought experiment. So I want to ask you not if you want to have something yourself, but in general, should we allow a certain augmentation to be produced and also be used in society? So the first one is, what if there's an implant, not an implant to pay, but an implant for snipers to increase their accuracy, so they become better at sniping people? Just with a quick raise of hands, who says, well, we should allow these kinds of implants? Well, in the Blauwe Zaal, it's about 50%, I would say. Now another thought experiment. What if we have the same kind of technology, but we give it to surgeons? So surgeons improve their accuracy and they perform their surgery better. In that way, save more lives. Who's in favor of that kind of implant? No, that's almost 90%. So that's really interesting. And in the last couple of years, numerous institutions surveyed the general public about their opinion on human augmentation technologies. The most recent one is by PEW Research from the US. It's from, I think, 2 weeks ago. You also had Kaspersky Labs in 2020. But I also like the work of the Rathenau Institute from 2012, because they did not only do the survey, but they also did an analysis. What are factors that make that people are in favor of an augmentation technology or against such a technology? Well, give you some obvious examples. If you're familiar with the technology because your friends and relatives are using it, you are generally in favor of it. And also, if there's enough information about the risks and benefits, you are also probably more in favor of the technology. But what's also interesting is if a technology is more permanent and invasive, like an implant, people are more against it, in contrast to, for example, something that is temporary and non-invasive. You can also think of the difference between an implant and a sleeve that you saw by Team Hart. That's the difference, and people are more in favor when it's temporary and non-invasive. But also, and that's why I did the small thought experiment with you, is the social weight of an augmentation. So in general, people are more in favor of a technology if it allows a surgeon to perform her operations better compared to when you have the same kind of implant for a sniper to do his or her work better. So these are a couple of factors to take into account when we talk about the public acceptance of human augmentation. So I talked about implants, but I also want to share some other augmentation technologies with you. And the first one is, right now, when we communicate with computers, we type on the keyboard, we swipe, maybe you'll also talk with your device or your smartphone. But the next revolution in human-to-computer or human-to-machine interaction are so-called brain-computer interfaces. Well, I also have one device by NextMind. So you put it, like you can see in the clip, on the back of your head. And it translates with EEG sensors some of my brain signals into operations for the computer. And I can make music with it, and I can also play these games just with the power of my thoughts. And this is actually my favorite game. It's called Platformer, and I can move the little platform with my thoughts. So I think my prediction is, my expectation is that for certain professions in the future, we will see more usage of brain-computer interfaces. And what's also interesting is that this company, NextMind, which is based in Paris, France, has been acquired by Snap, like Snapchat, last week. So there's also the prediction that in the future, when you wear the Snap goggles, glasses, then they can also analyze your brain. And when you're thinking of a forest, you suddenly see a forest in your screen appearing. At least that's a possible scenario. But so these brain-computer interfaces are about analysis of the brain, but we can also influence and tinker with the brain. For example, with the use of small electrical currents or also magnetic pulses. This is a consumer device called the Tink, and you put it on your temple, and that has a small strip, and then you put it behind the back of your ear, and it sends a small electrical current via your skull. And yeah, I tested it. It works quite well, but I prefer a cup of espresso. But maybe in the future we could see these kinds of applications also in certain work occupations, or like to combat fatigue, in this example. But think about it, you can have technology on the outside of the skull, but then it needs to get through the skull and through a tiny layer of water. We can also go directly into the skull. That works even better. And the creators of South Park already thought of a really interesting use case of this application.
Patient B5, would you step out here, please? Patient B5 here has been fitted with the new V-chip.
Oh, my head hurts.
Don't worry about that. Now, I want you to say, doggy.
Doggy.
Notice that nothing happens. Now say, Montana.
Montana.
Good. Now, pillow.
Pillow.
All right. Now I want you to say, horsefucker.
Go ahead, Eric. It's all right.
Now I'd like you to say, big floppy donkey dick.
No!
Success! The child doesn't want to swear.
This isn't fair. You sent the baby here.
We will start putting V-chips in all our children next week.
Well, sorry for the vulgar language. That's entirely my responsibility. So that's about brain implants. And for the last type of category, I want to talk about senses, like also in the introduction by Ben. And I want to think about your vision, about your optics. For example, do you trust your eyesight? Well, this is one example. This is not a video, but this is an image. This is an optical illusion called the peripheral drift illusion. And for example, if you focus on one part of the image, then you will see that the image stops moving. So you can try it for yourself. Probably, I see a lot of people staring, but if you stare on one object, one part of the image, it will stop moving. So we cannot only always trust our senses, but we can improve our senses. We can improve our eyesight. I'm not sure in the future if we can get rid of these kinds of optical illusions, but still, let's talk about our vision. Do you want night vision, for example? There was a group of biohackers and they experimented with chlorine E6, tiny droplets, that gave them night vision for a couple of hours. Yeah, I don't like the image, but still it's interesting technology. But I also am fond of the story of Jeroen. Jeroen is a friend of mine. He's also featured in my book. And Jeroen has retina pigmentosa, which meant he became blind at the age of 20. And for a couple of years, he wears these glasses. And there's a tiny camera on the glass. And that's connected to a small computer on the right side of the glasses. And that is connected to a chip inside his eye. And that's connected to the optical nerves in his eye. And now he can see for 60 pixels in black and white again. So he can see, he does not have our full vision like we have, but still he can see more than when he was blind. And what's cool about the story of Jeroen is that he does these amazing things with his eyesight of 60 pixels. For example, he shoots arrows, he does archery, and he also goes skiing in the winter, and he even does these crazy parkour stunts. And every time I watch this video, I still think, oh no, Jeroen, do not do it. Do not go for the jump. But so it's so awesome that with these 60 pixels, he does all these amazing things. So that's a really interesting story. And technically, this is not a human augmentation because this is more the use of technology in a medical field. but what if in one time in the future maybe bionic eyes are better than biological ones? What will people choose to have a bionic instead of a biological eye? So these are all relevant questions, and that's also the last part of my presentation. What's the impact of these kinds of augmentation technologies? And the first one is I shared the story of Jeroen. But Jeroen is one of the 700 users of the second sight system with the chip implant. But a couple of months ago, the news broke that the company that makes these devices got out of business. So now Jeroen and also his fellow wearers, users of this technology, they have a technology which does not get updated. There are no upgrades. He cannot call customer service anymore. So you must envision it for yourself. Now you have your vision, but you're not sure when you will become blind again. Maybe in 1 hour, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years. So especially when we give these vital skills, vital capabilities like our senses, we hand it over to technology, we also need to be aware of the lifetime maintenance and also updating of these kinds of things, especially in cases like with Jeroen. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is there's more and more debate among technology ethicists about the question, is technology neutral or not? But if you think of the examples I gave, they are a lot about augmentations in the workplace. For example, with the brain-computer interface, can we communicate more seamlessly with computers? And maybe that allows us to work better, to work harder, to work more efficient and effective. So that really makes me think about what's the main purpose of some of these augmentation technologies? Is it that we increase our human flourishing, or are we becoming better employees? We work better. We as a human resource are becoming better. And of course, that idea is not completely new. That made me think of the famous silent comedy movie Modern Times from 1936 with Charlie Chaplin, in which he also criticized the dogma of working in factories and that every facet and every thing that he and his fellow employees did in his factory always needs to be more effective, more efficient, more based on time, so that they as humans are more seen as a sort of resource instead of being human. So that's something to keep in mind when you think about augmentation technology. What's their use case? Who's developing it? And what kind of situations are we using this technology? And the third thing I want to tell you is about, do we also run the risk of losing certain skills? So instead of upgrading ourselves with human augmentation, maybe we are also downgrading certain other aspects. For example, when I was a little boy of 8 years old playing Soldier in the Woods, I remembered a lot of phone numbers because we did not have a mobile phone at the time. And I also could read a map. And right now we have all outsourced these capabilities to our smartphone. I do not need to remember phone numbers anymore or need to read a map anymore. We all have apps for that. So the question is, does it also decrease other human skills? For example, watching an analog clock.
Can you look at this and tell me what time it is?
Oh, no. No, I can't. It is 4:37. Is that correct? It's 2. I want to say 40. No, not 45.
Chris, let me ask you this. Where do you go to college?
UC Arlington.
You want to say anything to your teachers back in college?
Not at all, because they're going to be so disappointed that I have not read a clock like this since elementary school. Let me see. Okay.
Oh man, it is 8:10, 8:20, 8:17. No?
AM or PM?
Well, let's hope that it will not be our future that we cannot read clocks anymore. So to conclude, I shared some highlights about human augmentation technologies, about implants and brain-computer interfaces, and our senses, upgrading our senses. And I think for the future of this terrain, I'm still fascinated by it, and I think we'll see a lot more also being done by Team Heart on this domain. And I think we need science and we need technology to upgrade ourselves, but we also, I think, need to think about the moral issues, also about the ethical dilemmas that arise. And for that, I think we also need creativity and fantasy, just like little Peter had when he was 8 years old and he was fired from the army by Richard. Thank you very much.
Yes, Peter, thank you very much for this introduction. I'm just going to make some space here.
Yeah.
Thanks. This introduction, also sharing, of course, all the considerations that, well, you have to take into account when working on these kind of technologies. There's a lot still to discuss, and you're also very much invited online to put your questions in the chat. And then also, of course, if there are already questions in the room, feel free to raise your hand. There's one up here. The catch box is, yeah. Would you like to throw the catch box?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So first of all, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, what's the coolest application in terms of human augmentation you've tested so far, and what are you looking forward to the most in terms of what's coming up?
The coolest?
Nice question.
Let me think. So the question is, what's the coolest and what type of augmentation I most look forward? So I think the coolest is, I think the brain-computer interface, I think is pretty cool, especially because of the future applications. And one aspect I'm really looking forward to is actually the merger of some technologies. For example, I also spoke with Danny, and he's paralyzed from about here till there, and now he can walk with an exoskeleton. But what I did not know is that an exoskeleton is pretty rudimentary. So you put push on a button, and then you walk, and then you walk. You know. But I read about an article where in a research institution in France, they also tested a combination of a brain-computer interface and an exoskeleton. So I hope for a future that for these kinds of people, then when you think of moving, then also the exoskeleton moves. So I think that's one of the application I look forward to the most. Thank you.
Can I ask us a follow-up question to that? Because of course there are going to be more really fascinating developments that everyone would really like to join in on. At the same time, we're already living in a society that's really technology-driven, and that people really have a FOMO, right? Whether it is for online platforms or whatever. What do you anticipate for that?
Well, I'm sort of also more scared of that future.
Okay. In what way?
Now, well, that's an interesting, because what you see right now when you look at the big tech companies in Silicon Valley and probably also elsewhere, is they gain a lot of profits from their current data model with selling our personal data and advertisements. And so they got a lot of money, but you see that they're now also investing in, some of them are investing also in these augmentation technologies. Mm-hmm. For example, Facebook is also working on a device which you, like sort of bracelet, and it could, how you say it, interpret it when you would click with your finger. So you did before you click your finger, so you don't have to click with your finger anymore. That makes sense. And in that way, you could have like think of a thumbs up, and then the device will give it thumbs up.
You could like without having to press.
Yeah, that's a summary.
Okay.
And I think that's sort of scary. Like when these kinds of companies come, they already have our data on what we like and what we swipe and how we think. But next up, will they really hack into our brains? I think so. These issues concerning privacy and data ownership, they become even more important with the age of these augmentation technologies, especially when it's concerning our brain data.
Yes, and we already know that companies like Facebook are very good at drawing our attention in
Yeah.
and keeping that attention there.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. So especially when we live in the metaverse with a brain-computer interface, is that a utopia or dystopia? Well, I think at the moment I prefer this reality, but yeah.
What about you in the room? Is that something you look forward to?
Not so much.
After this explanation, maybe less. Okay, other questions for Peter? Could you throw the catch box to the person over there?
Hello, thank you for the presentation, first of all. And my question is concerning that. So, all these implementations in our body, at what point would you say that will become more than humans? Because at the end, if you change all the wood of the ship, you're not longer the same ship that you were before. So what would you say?
Yeah, I think that also our vision of what it is to be human and what is it to be more than human also changes over time. So that was also one of the factors, criteria in the study by the Rathenau Institute I mentioned. So take, for example, I'm not familiar with when coffee was invented, but probably around, I don't know, 1200s, when there were some people that were using coffee and they were, whoa, I have major focus, major concentration. Maybe at that time that was thought that drinking coffee was a sort of that you would be more than human. And now we think that's normal and we look at other things. So I think also the meaning of what it is to be human also changes over time. So I think that's also a fluid concept, as you could say. Yeah.
There are some, I'm just going to move to some questions online. Some of them are about your implant. Someone is asking, can I shake your hand to extract money from you? Which is maybe more interesting than because how do you protect that?
Well, it's the same kind of technology like in your bank card, but also you can now pay with your smartwatch or with other wearable technologies. So you can put a limit on the amount.
On your hand.
I can put a limit on the amount on my hand, and I think above 50 euros or something, I also have to put my code with alongside with the chip. So yeah.
And there's someone asking, do you think there are any applications that should always remain off limits, ethically speaking?
So some applications that remain off limits. Well, there's some talk about, there's an interesting TED talk by Hugh Herr. I think the Team Heart people know of him. He's also, he's working on prosthetics, and he also has a prosthetic himself, and which also allows him, he's also an avid mountaineer, to climb certain routes that other people, regular people, cannot climb because of his prosthetic. But it's also, in this field, there's also talk about now our biological legs and arms are better than artificial ones, but maybe in the future you have better artificial legs and arms than biological ones. And for me, that's off limits, that I think, well, I'm not if I'm healthy to replace this biological hand for an artificial one. But there are some people that say, yeah, if it's a better artificial hand, just give it to me. But
because
for me...
Why is that off limits?
Well...
What in that makes it off limits?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I think I really like my biological parts. So, and I'm also, I think, a little bit warned by the story of the second side users. When a company gets out of business, well, how do you deal with the maintenance and the upgrades? So, but it's another story that then when I, because of an accident, maybe lose my arm, then it's an interesting question. Would I, if it's possible, have an arm with the same kind of capabilities I have right now? Or maybe I want to have a super arm that makes me do better these kinds of fights. I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting to see where is the line exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess that's different for everyone as well.
I think that's different for everyone. Yeah.
I think there was a question just before. Has already been answered. There is one up here. you can throw the catch box, yeah. We will get you a new head. Yeah.
I think that's off limit for now.
Yeah, probably. And too difficult, yeah.
So thank you for your presentation. I was actually thinking about your story playing soldier in the woods. And I was wondering what your thoughts are about human augmentation and then the new type of discrimination that might occur from that. Say that you would have been a super soldier when you were a child, and you would have something that better eyesight, could run faster. Would your friends still want to play with you?
Wow, that's a good question. This also has to do with what are your goals in life, I presume. And I think especially as a child, the most important thing is that your fellow friends, they like you. But it also makes me think about a criticism that also famous scholar Yuval Noah Harari gave in his book Homo Deus. He also wrote *Sapiens*, for example. Is where he warns that, and that also kind of made me think about your comment earlier, that he says now there's maybe a social difference between people of certain groups, and also maybe a cultural difference and in income. But he warns not only also genetic modification and other things, that it also can lead to a biological difference between people, between the haves and the have-nots, that are smarter, live longer, are richer. So I think that's also indeed a valid concern, and also makes me think about what's important in life. So yeah, great question.
Thanks. Any comments maybe from Team Hart? Your front, or any questions? You have a question? Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the presentation as well. I have a question again about the children playing. About the children playing in the field. So, as a parent, you have a new child. What is your right to augment your child?
Yeah, like the South Park clip, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's interesting because last September I also became father for the first time of a little boy. And
how many chips does he have already?
Yeah, 10. No, oh, sorry, before this gets a meme on the internet. 0. And yeah, that really also made me think, like, if I want to tinker with my own body, that's my problem or my right or whatever. And I think that's also because I was raised here in the Netherlands, that autonomy is very important. And I think the same would apply to our child, that if he wants to do these things, he has to do it when he's 18, I think. So, and also raising a child now for almost 6 months also made me aware that technology can fix a lot of things, but you also have to, he's also, just as I am lucky to be born in the Netherlands with loving parents. And so there's also a question about how much can technology fix, and also how much is luck, and also having a close relationship with your relatives and these kinds of things. So yeah, I kind of became more nuanced after I became a newborn father, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's of course interesting because this is a person that doesn't have autonomy yet, and you as a parent, yeah, kind of you can rule over that child, so to say.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah.
If you've thought about this carefully, of course, but perhaps not everyone does this in future.
Yeah, I think so, and it's quite funny, by the way. This Friday, it's the 1st of April. Yeah, a couple of years ago, there was a commercial by MediaMarkt on the 1st of April, when they said, now you can buy implants for your children, so you can track them everywhere.
Yeah.
And they got a lot of attention, a lot of interest for that commercial. But it was an April Fool's joke. So, but I would not allow that.
It's perhaps worrisome if it's so popular.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I see we're running out of time. So for now, we have to finish this program. Thank you once again, Peter, for telling us more about the great opportunities, but also the pitfalls, or the possible pitfalls, as ever. Peter Joosten. So also on behalf of Team Heart, thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you again at Studium Generale. Bye.